The power of large language models cannot be denied, but there are serious concerns. First, the hallucinations, where they just make stuff up. Second, the privacy issue. Are these models being trained on our prompts? And third, sovereignty. Where is the data actually stored, and are those practices in compliance? Find out more about private AI on this episode of Future Proof.
The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
Sergio Gago with me, CTO of Cloudera. Atari shirt. I don't know if you can see that. Baller. This guy knows what he's talking about. Atari saved my life when I was like 8 years old. It gave us something to do, like ding, 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 tank battle, Pong. Come on.
Saved my life as well. So with Commodore and Spectrum.
The Commodore 64.
I like to think that was the reason why I became a CTO and came into data and all that.
Very nice.
Thank you very much for having me, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote my first programs on a Commodore 64.
Basic.
I did a Dungeons and Dragons simulation model where you would like put in your number of warriors and your hit points and what you were fighting, what their armor class was, and what all that stuff, and it would do 100 battles and give you the percentage chance of winning.
I think that's interesting because when you had access to that code, it allowed you to start hacking and tinkering with that and say, hey, what if I give my warrior more lives?
Right.
I remember that Nibbles game, the snake game that then came into the Nokias.
Right.
When that came out, I could play into that and say, what if I give myself infinite lives? So you start hacking into that and you end up a CTO. Go figure.
Look at that. That's outstanding. And at a very exciting time, a very disruptive time. You look at what ChatGPT just did and these foundational models and the transformers in particular, and it really blew people's minds. Now, you have to be careful about these things, about how you apply it, because, of course, they are probabilistic in nature. They are not deterministic.
Yeah.
And analytics and business intelligence has been deterministic. So I want to know, what are the numbers? What's the prediction you can make? Which decisions should we make? So you got to be careful about the Gen AI stuff, but that's where all these guardrails come into place. And RAG is one of them. MCP is a guardrail to a certain extent, right? What do you think about this sudden explosion of MCP servers? I've never seen one particular product that hits so many different waves at the same time. Everyone's got an MCP server. What do you think?
So to some extent, this is not a new concept, right? We used to build applications and we said, we need to have a way to access those applications by other systems. And then we created APIs.
Right.
And in the last decade or so, or 15 years, every application needed to have an API that could be consumed by other software.
Right.
But that's deterministic, as you were saying. Then ChatGPT came out and brings with it a whole industrial revolution that is arguably larger and bigger and faster than any other industrial revolution.
Sure.
We started with building chatbots and things that today seem to be table stakes. But in 2023, we're like, oh my God, how do I serve this wave as we go forward? And then we realized, well, we can have all these systems also writing code. And we can have all the systems having access to memory.
Right.
And giving them context of where they are operating and for whom they're working.
Right.
With things like RAG and other stuff, right?
Sure.
And then we started thinking, well, if I have a system that does all that, what will happen if I let it talk to another system? And how would they operate? And then what if I bring a third party and a fourth and a fifth? And we started thinking, how do humans operate the best? Is it when we are solid single rock stars with nothing else, or when we are a music band and we collaborate and everyone brings the best of them and then we work together towards a single goal?
Yeah.
So what if we get agents that are specialized, have specific access and data, and then we let them collaborate?
Right.
So the next question was, all right, how do we find a way for them to share information and to have skills, access to tools, we don't have to reinvent the wheel continuously. And that's when Anthropic said, hey, here's a standard that we call MCP. Hey, world, do you guys like it? As an open standard, open source standard. It's not a software, right? It's just a standard, a specification on how to build that access to, again, data and skills. Skills can be what's the weather like in New York today?
Hmm.
It's foggy. Or give me the output of a model that gives me the forecast of sales of my shops tomorrow. And then you can say these agents can have access to these skills, these other agents to these other skills, and they can have access to these data, but not to these other data. Essentially, like humans, right? We have skills as well, and we collaborate among each other to leverage those skills and build something that is exponential. So today, MCP is the specification that has been adopted by the world, but there's a lot to say still. There are many limitations in terms of security, for example, on spread, on different speed on the agents, on different models. There's going to be a lot to say still, but yes, every single application, is the long answer, will need to have a way to expose its data and capabilities to agents in the same way that we can do to humans.
Right, right. Well, and you have to track these agents. There need to be log files. There need to be ways that you can kill a pod that's not doing the right things to know when that's happening. You see a lot of different companies talking about control towers. For example, what's your take on how to control agents at significant scale, and what does that look like, and how many people need to be involved monitoring the agent behavior? What does these new teams and new roles look like?
So that's a really interesting question, because it's essentially a way of thinking, how do we want to operate at the enterprise level? I'm personally very optimistic. I think in a few years, we're going to have digital colleagues that surpass the number of human colleagues.
Yeah, right. That's what Jensen Huang was saying too.
It will happen, right? It's already happening as we speak. Obviously, that requires controls. At the same time, every technology that we have created needed those controls. When Ford created the Model T, there were no signals or traffic lights in the road.
Right.
And that brought some problems, right? So the world quickly tried to bring some, hey, we need some driving lessons and licenses and some signals and so on, some stop signals, actually. Blinkers. Well, people don't use the blinkers anyway.
You're supposed to.
So with agents and AI in general is the same thing. We have the technology, now we have to bring the guardrails. The challenge there is that this is happening exponentially faster than with the Model T back in what, a century ago almost. So we need to be very quick from the governance perspective, sovereignty perspective, who controls the models, the weights, and so on. And then at the same time, be able to put platforms in place that allow us to know what can the agents do and not do, what do they output, what data can they access, and to whom they can give it. Now, you can think about that model, and that's my favorite way of looking into that, in the same way that we think about humans. Let me put it this way. When you go into the office, you have probably an access card. And that access card allows you to go into certain rooms, but not into other rooms. At the same time, you can access some files. If you try to access all the, I don't know, pay slips from all your colleagues, most likely you're not going to be able to access that information, right? From an IT perspective, an HR perspective, our enterprises, our companies, every company is very mature on controlling that flow. We need to mimic that into the agents. And one of the things that we are starting to see around is, well, it's almost like the HR departments and the IT departments are merging so that these digital colleagues have exactly the same type of accesses, limitations, and controls. If I am an agent that's helping you write a report for your boss or a letter to a customer, this agent needs to have exactly the same accesses that you as a human has, because otherwise it cannot do the job, right? And at the same time, it needs to know and understand that it's talking to you and not to someone else, so that this data is contextual on what's needed. So all the tools and platforms, and that's the way that we build Cloud AI, is built in a way so that all that is built into the system. From what is the LLM that you're using? Can you control it? Can you make sure that it does not change overnight? For example, if you use GPT-5 today, but you try to use the GPT-4 prompts, they don't work the same.
Right.
So imagine you had that baked into a mission-critical process in your company.
Sure.
You're into trouble.
It's a problem, yeah.
At the same time, you need to be able to put those guardrails, either red flags or stop words or things that block access to certain data or processes to a given agent, or to not give certain information to a human because it's out of policy, for example. And then last step, letting the agents talk to each other and play with each other.
Right.
So what a time to be alive.
There's a lot going on in there, and you make a really excellent point about being careful and really thinking through the use cases. And when I think about where things are going, wow, as well as anyone that every enterprise is unique. Even if they have the same set of tools in the same industry, they still have different people, they have different policies, different priorities, and you want your AI agents to absorb that. But the key, I think you even suggested this, was to give them just enough context to do what they need to get done. And there's a recency bias that you're going to want in there. And there are some guardrails you want in there. Some of the companies I'm talking to are basically using other models to sort of gauge, okay, this was the output. Is that correct? That's quality assurance, basically, but it is additional cost, right? But maybe I'll throw this question at you. It seems to me that one of the challenges is that the foundation keeps changing so quickly. You kind of commented on this. What's your advice to CIOs to just stay focused and not get swept up in the desire to do new things before they're ready?
Right. So you're spot on the enterprise fabric that needs to be embedded in the system, right? And it all boils down into what is the value that we're generating from this? Do you have a very clear use case with an idea of the ROI that you're going to get? Why are you doing this?
Right.
Is this operational efficiency? Is this potential of revenue generation? Is this getting better insights? Is analytical process? Whatever that is, right? But it needs to be very clear instead of shooting from the hip.
Right.
The challenge that many companies have had since 2023 on deploying LLM-based use cases, whether they were chatbots or agents or anything like that, was that most of those were proofs of concept that were experimental, generated amazing wow factor, right? They went that, they showed that to the CEO loved it and said, can we bring this into production tomorrow?
Right.
And,
No.
and then the legal team or the compliance team came in and said, absolutely no, you're nuts.
Right.
But still, they were able to show value very quickly, right? Most of the use cases that were tried by the company, and there was an MIT research report last week about this, failed miserably, either because there was no ROI from that, because again, it was technology driven instead of case driven,
right?
Or two, because it got stuck at the POC level. So when you build these platforms, you have to make sure that they are baked, completely embedded in your company data fabric. Back into the point of the agent accessing your data and so on. If you can build your agents within the same place where you have already vetoed and vetted your infrastructure, that your cybersecurity team, your legal team, everyone already has that enterprise grade,
right? Then
you can build that into production safely. Let me put it this way. When we have been doing machine learning, classical machine learning for many years now, we've got quite mature into building that data fabric, the governance layer, if you will. But we know the data catalogs that we put in place. In Cloudera, we just acquired a company called Octopi last year. Who can access the data? What is the lineage of that data? And then when you use that to train a machine learning model, so you can have certain explainability and interpretability. We had that very well and robust all the way until the beginning of generative AI.
Right.
And then suddenly generative AI comes in and we all forgot about all those best practices and principles and say, no, let's just go and build proof of concept like there's no tomorrow. Now companies realize we need to have exactly the same pipelines and processes and bring the agents into that process.
Right. No, that's very clever. I think you really hit the nail on the head there. And it kind of reminds me of some of the things we've talked about on this show. And we got our segment ending here in just a couple of minutes, but I'll throw this curveball at you. For 50 years, we have worked to perfect the foundation of information systems, which is the database. And we've made it faster, more durable, allowed more concurrent users. But one thing that was never, ever in question was quality of the data. You always got out what you put in. And now with generative AI, it's like you're slapping a noise filter on the end of this 50-year pristine process. So it's going to, and we're almost like in defense mode now. We're like trying to tame this thing to get it to act. Isn't that wild? Is that not the most remarkable inflection point?
It is, and it is, I think, a brave new world. Databases for a long time were structured data. And LLMs, by definition, work on unstructured data. They generate text. So we're not that good at identifying is this correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right? From a factual standpoint, you can ask the LLM, what's the population of California?
Right.
And you can verify whether that's right or wrong.
Right.
But if you ask the LLM, can you write for me an essay about the history of California? Is that right or wrong?
Right.
You have to think in terms of completeness,
Right.
alignment with you as a human and with the context, the size of the document. It has many more factors to evaluate, which is linked to your point before on having yet another LLM going in and evaluating the output. But it's not a binary good, not good anymore.
That's right.
And structured data is much more complex.
That's right. Well, and you're going to have layers. You're going to have stochastic layers, deterministic layers, stochastic layers, deterministic layers. And the key is to have those humans in the loop, the people who know what's right, who make the decisions. That's why most of these use cases have been internally focused as decision support, as your little helper who's making suggestions, but don't let them drive the car, folks, especially the big expensive car. Don't mean there is self-driving cars, but they do crash. Like bad things have happened. So we're kind of knocking on the door. And Sergio, there's this new concept, a new term I heard, private AI, which is where you can span on-prem, cloud, public cloud, private cloud. Explain what private AI is and how you get there.
It's a beautiful concept because you would get a different answer depending on who you ask. So let me try to explain the concept with an example first.
All right.
Let's say you're the CEO of a large bank, right? And in your company, you have many credit analysts that evaluate your credit risk, the loans that you provide, the risk of those loans, and so on. These people are really good quantitative analysts, right? They know the math, they know the ethos of the bank, the risk profile. So imagine a company comes in and says, hey, I can replace all your credit analysts. They're going to be on the other side of the world. I'm not going to tell you where. I'm not going to tell you who they are. I just tell you they're good. Trust me. I'm going to charge you per word they give you back, not for the quality of the words, but just a couple of things. I can cancel my contract anytime, any day. I can change the price anytime, any day. I can change those analysts and their output will be different as well. But don't you worry, it's going to be okay. And yeah, maybe I will change the capacity, the amount of words that I can give you. Would you, as the CEO of a large bank, agree to that? But it may be cheaper. And scalable and no, of course you will say no. So today when we use pay-as-you-go, third-party LLMs, that is what we're doing effectively. And don't get me wrong, those systems are great. They help us build the system. But if you try to use, I think we mentioned before, a GPT-4 prompt in GPT-5, the answer is not going to be the same. It's going to, even though GPT-5 is a better model, maybe the answer is worse because they've moved the rug under your feet. So as a company, when you control your supply chain and all your systems that build your company, you need to know what models, every part of your infrastructure, from the hardware to the models, what are they running? When can you change it if you want to change them on your own terms? So that is the concept of private AI, having the governance and the sovereignty of controlling your own destiny effectively. That means you decide what models to run, you decide where to run them, and when and how you update them. If I decide to install Llama, Mistral, DeepSeek, any model, I decide when I want to go to the next version so that we add determinism. The third step is the data that goes in there. How do we make sure that through your fine-tuning mechanisms, through RAG and other systems, the data that goes in, make sure that all the process, the input and the output is still private to me. My data is not being used to train any other systems. It doesn't leave my safe environments. And then the output is only used for the process that I deem important within my data governance. Who can access what? That is private AI. That can be on a public cloud, that can be on a data center, that can be on the private cloud, but it needs to be fully under your control and under your own terms all the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, the movement continues to be bigger and bigger models, which is interesting because we've learned bigger is not always better. And I've talked to some really smart people. My buddy, Dr. Usama Fayyad, he runs the Institute for Experiential AI out of Northeastern University in Massachusetts. And he said to me a couple of years ago, he said, these models, they're too big. They're not supposed to work. We don't know why they work. And I'm listening to this guy like he's one of the experts in the field. And the people at the coalface don't know how these things work. Anthropic is trying to instrument things, but still, like, that is very unwieldy for anyone involved in governance, anyone involved in compliance. That's why you want these guardrails. That's why I think this private AI concept is powerful. But what about the smaller language models? Is that an area of focus for you guys as well?
It absolutely is. And at the end of the day, it's no one size fits all.
Right.
And companies need to understand that. Now, what size fits what?
Right.
That's the question. So let's say you have a very simple use case. For example, you have a long text and you want to extract company names from that text. A relatively small model, even one that can run on your own laptop, can probably do a decent job at that with a high level of accuracy. Now, if you want to write a full essay with a lot of context and nuances and reasoning capabilities, that model is not enough.
Right.
What companies need to put in place is a whole benchmarking system.
Oh.
That's along the lines of the guardrails and the ability of moving towards this sort of private AI. What do I mean by this? Imagine you have this use case of extracting company names from a document. By the way, it's a very typical natural language processing use case.
Right.
You create, let's say 100, but we can say 1,000 examples on a data set, a golden data set, with the input and the output that's expected. Maybe it's human curated. We call this labeling in the days of machine learning.
Right.
So you have a table of 1,000 rows that says, this text has this company, this text has this company, with 100% accuracy. And then you run another data set, your experimental data set, another 1,000 text with any model you want, let's say GPT-4. And you're going to get a level of accuracy, for example, 99.9%. Then you say, all right, let me see a small model, a Nemotron small one, or a 8 billion llama model or something. Let me run it again and compare that level of accuracy. And then you get, well, with a very small model, I get a 98.5% accuracy. So from a business perspective, you can make a decision.
Right.
Is this enough for a tenth of the cost?
Right.
Yes, no. And then you make a business decision. If this is a mission critical use case, probably you would want to go with the highest accuracy.
Right.
But if it's something that will always have a human in the loop, they're going to be pretty okay by paying 1/10.
Well, and so you're answering a question that we had a little bit earlier, which is, what are the new roles in this new world that you're going to have? Because the LLMs give tremendous productivity increases for the individual worker. Like, that's one thing for sure, is that they can, if you learn how to use these things, you can burn through so much more drudgery. You can do so much more research. You can really help yourself get a long way. It's at the enterprise level that things get a bit dicey. But to your point, I think this benchmarking position is pretty important. And so you're going to have someone who is focused on quality assurance across models, across the business, working with the teams, working with the data science teams to say, okay, look, there's your output. This is what you have now. Let's go ahead and test it. And that's a regular process. That's a full-time job to pay attention to those things, right?
It's a complete compliance and evaluating and data labeling process that works on the unstructured way and on the structured way. So for example, if your model requires to do a mathematical computation, like multiplying through 7 times 3, you probably don't want the LLM answer for that. We know that LLMs are not good at math,
right? But
we want to give that LLM a calculator so that the answer from the calculator we know is deterministic for most calculators.
Right.
Likewise, if you need to use a classifier machine learning model that we know is tried and true, that we can explain, we don't want the LLM to make a guess on that machine learning model. We want it to use that model and leverage all the tools in hand.
Right.
Someone's like, if you have your toolbox and you have a hammer and you want to try to hammer a nail, you go and pick the hammer. You're telling the LLM, can you nail a hammer with your hand?
Right.
Better not.
Don't do that. That's funny. You know, we only got a couple minutes left here, but the last one I'll throw at you is really quite bewildering. If you look at some of these new companies that are just taking off, like Windsurf and Replete and a bunch of these other guys, you can now generate so much code so quickly. But my impression is that you want to use that for exploratory purposes, for R&D. And then if you're going to put something into production, that's when you have to be very careful about what you're doing, because these companies that just take code from Claude or from some of these other models and just throw it into production, there are going to be long-term problems that you won't even know about for weeks or months.
100%.
Right? And so there's got to be some tension in the development world where people are like, come on, let's go. And someone's like, hold on, like, let's make sure that this is bulletproof. Let's make sure it does exactly what we want and test it. So it's like that QA role again is going to be of tremendous importance, right?
100%. And back into the point we made earlier, these are supposed to be extensions that make us superhuman,
Right.
not things that replace
That's
us
right.
as humans.
That's right.
So these byte coding tools are amazing.
Right.
We call them byte coding. I use them all the time. But think about this: how did we create a functional requirement of an application? When we wanted to build a website, an iPhone application, or anything like that, we would create a product document, maybe some mock-ups, maybe we would do a lot of text and write in. So a product manager would take days, weeks, maybe longer to write a document that then we would give to a group of engineers to say, hey guys, can you build this? And how long it would take.
Right.
What if instead of doing that, this product manager goes and builds the actual prototype on how this person wants it to look like and to interact and the different functionalities? Is that what you will deploy into production? Absolutely not.
Right.
But is the best prototype that you can give to engineers to go and build.
That's right.
And then engineers start building that. And they use coding agents to be much, much faster, as in 4 to 5 times faster.
Right.
You don't need to type the code yourself.
Right.
It's almost like every software developer becomes a technical lead that reviews the code of an army of interns.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening.
But you do review that.
That's right.
And it's amazing.
That's right. No, that's exactly correct. So it makes you a superhero. It kind of takes you up to the next level, but you still need to dot I's and cross T's and make sure it's all pristine.